Okay, so The Book Thief. It's a fantastic book, a wonderful piece of literature. Zuzak's a wonderful writer. And with our Year 10 unit, I was preparing a class for an exam, an analytical essay on an unseen question that was to be marked by an unknown marker. Now, because we'd had that 11-week term in Term 2, we'd finished by week 8, so we had 3 weeks left of Term 2, right through to week 9 of Term 3. So it was a 12-week teaching sequence plus the holidays. That's a really long time to do The Book Thief. So let's just have a look at how Zuzak writes. When the coughing stopped, there was nothing but the nothingness of life moving on with a shuffle or a near-silent twitch. A suddenness found its way onto his lips then, which were a corroded brown colour and peeling like old paint, in desperate need of redoing. From another page, within seconds, snow would be carved into her skin. His writing is very strongly metaphorical. It's picture language. And for native speakers and people like you and I, it's beautiful. We read the book and he brought me to tears many times. But when you have a class like this, it's a challenge. In my Year 10 class, I had 2 grade 11 girls doing QCIA who joined my class because it was calm. I had 5 boys on ICP 3 and 4. These are kids from our special education unit. I had 2 newly arrived Islander boys who were on band scale 2 and 3 for English. Now, if you're not familiar with the band scale 5 means can cope at year level with some support. Band scale 4 means needs considerable support. Word order hasn't sorted itself out yet. So band scale 2 and 3 is extremely low. I then had 13 international students from our graduate program, as in they've left their families behind in their countries. They've come here to live with homestays and to work their way through to grade 12. They were all on band scale 4 or 5. And then at the beginning of Term 3, I was also having 6 Japanese exchange students come and join our group, and they would be with us just for the term, some of them staying longer, and they're band scale 3 to 4. On top of this, I had 3 long-term local students with an EALD background, as well as 1 native speaker with some social emotional issues who needed a calm environment where there weren't going to be explosive outbursts. So I had 32 kids. I started with 26 and they said to me, well, we've got these 6 Japanese coming in. They need to be in your group. You're the ESL specialist. Who are you going to boot out? And I couldn't boot any of them out, so I said, give me a big class. It's just for 1 term. So I ended up with 32. Because I have such a big chunk of kids from our special ed unit, I do get a full-time helper from special ed, so it's not as bad as it sounds. Sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's a teacher aide. Additionally, my classroom, as well as being a regular-sized classroom, has a small withdrawal space where I can take a small group to work separately.
What's the QCIA?
Queensland Certificate of Individual Achievement. It's what special ed students tend to go on to in grade 11 and 12 instead of QCE. Okay? So, what do I do? Regularly when you're teaching a novel, the kids will be reading at home and you'll do all of your analytical work, all of your theme work in class. How's that going to work? I'd heard about flipped classrooms where the classroom bit gets done at home and then all the homework gets done in class. How could I make this work? Maybe this was going to be the way. Because if you've got kids who can't read, how do you teach them and prepare them for an exam with a novel? So I decided, well, normally the kids read at home and you do your work in class. I'll do it the other way around. I'll read to them. And so I began to read the book. And I read the whole book, all 583 pages. It took us quite a long time, but as I mentioned, we were going to have a large chunk of time that I'd be able to do this. So I began to read. It was all going very well. And then one day, I was reading a particularly virulent scene where Liesl is getting really angry with Ilse Hermann, and she yells at her and she's kicking the door. And I was getting quite dramatic because you've got to. The kids aren't getting the language. You need to be modelling the story. So I was really getting into it. And I looked over in the corner and my special ed boys are blocking their ears. They couldn't cope with the yelling. But that was fine. I went and I sat down and we made our peace. But I tried to flip things around. So we focused on our reading, and as we got to the end of each section, the kids all had an analysis booklet. So I'd made a booklet for each student, and in it, it had summaries of each of the sections. Now, these summaries I didn't write myself. I found them on G Drive at school, and I just simplified them. So I made the complex sentences to be compound or simple sentences, so it would be easier for the students to understand. And at the end of each chapter section, I put in some questions. Now, these are questions that I made up myself, and I wanted the kids not just to be relying on my reading the book for them. I wanted them dipping into the text and finding things. So after each question, I put what page they'll find the answer. That really helped them to focus and just to be reading key passages. And they did some amazing work. So each section had its questions and they worked through these. And these are some of the answers that they've come up with. So for example, with this one, what does death mean when he says, I'm not violent, I'm not malicious, I'm a result? This is from one of our Korean girls. Death means when everybody think about death, it's a spirit who take people to another world, which is stereotype. But he's saying, I'm not violent, I'm not malicious, I'm a result. He means that he's not the one who kills people or not being bad to everyone. And he's taking the soul out of people when they're dead, which means he's just the result. So you can see they're actually understanding it. And because it's focused and it's doable, it was small chunks of doable language. So they did really well with this. Another one, I like this one. How is Alex Steiner conflicted with regard to Nazi beliefs? Alex Steiner conflicted with regard to Nazi beliefs because he was in Nazi party, but he didn't hate the Jews. In the same time, he was owner of the shop, and if Jewish shops put out of business, he would get more money, but he didn't want them to be treated badly. So you can see that the language isn't great. She's still got structural issues going on, but she's showing a very deep understanding of what was going on. Yep.
Do you have to collect all their books, because they could be way off the mark? So do you do heaps of collection and...
What I would do... Yeah, I would do a checkpoint each week with them, and I would give them a section of the book to be reading in class, and I would just go through and I would skim, just make sure they're on task. I didn't tick every single question because that would take too long, but I did at other times have them swap books with their neighbour just to check that it was done, and I would wander around and just check that they had been doing it.
Doing it versus doing it correct is more my question.
Yeah. I would randomly sample and just see how they were going. And the students who I knew were at band scale 4 and were lower, then I would do some more work with them and I would pull them aside and spend some more focused time. Yep. I also gave them a vocabulary book. So the vocabulary that Zuzak uses is beautiful and it's very advanced, but for my kids, they have no connection. So after each section, they also get a vocabulary page and they have to write the definition and a sample sentence. These ones I could collect and I would just mark through and give them back the next lesson. After we'd done that, we worked on a sample essay together. I taught them just very simple bar, PL, ham structure because my kids really need a structure to be able to follow. So we worked through and we wrote our sample essay. And the results, when they sat their exam, just going on my mainstream students, not my special ed students, we ended up with 4 Bs, 14 Cs, and 6 Ds. That doesn't sound great, but I am immensely proud of my class. They worked really, really well. I want to read you just a tiny extract from one of my students. So this is her first Peel paragraph. Death's character, the question was, how has death as a narrator shaped the reader's response to the story? Death's character has been shown in an interesting way in this book, which is humanised. Death is not portrayed as cold as it usually was. Surprisingly, he has the sense of humour as anyone else, who is happy as well as down, compassionate but also complains. He describes that. On the surface, unflappable, unwavering. Below, unnerved, untie and undone, from page 329. So they're using evidence from the story, had all the right quotes, really constructed some good answers. So immensely proud of them. But that still leaves this bunch. I could not teach 12 weeks on one topic to a bunch of special ed students. They would not stay focused for that long, and it's a book they couldn't read. So I thought, well, what I'll do instead, they need to have some sense of unity with the rest of the class. I can't be completely separate. So with ICP kids, often they get given worksheets and put in a corner, but that is not treating them with dignity as learners. So I showed them the movie of The Book Thief. And that way they understood the story and could participate in some of our discussions, listen to some of my reading, but I also made them their own separate analysis booklet. So for them, I chose 3 texts. We would have The Book Thief for a few weeks, and then another children's story called Otto, the Autobiography of a Teddy Bear, which is a very related story. It's about a little teddy bear who is owned by a Jewish boy, gets taken away. The teddy bear gets passed on to an American soldier and eventually finds its way to America. And then the 2 Jewish boys who'd played with the teddy bear as children find their way and reunite as friends. So it's a lovely story, but with all the same themes as The Book Thief. And then I showed them the movie, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas. So they did 4-week units on each of these 3 themes. They also had their little analysis booklet, starting with what do I already know about World War II, write some questions you need to research, so they write their question and then find the answer, trying to teach them research skills. They also had then character mapping, word lists, some challenging words came up for them as well. And then some questions here. How are Jewish people treated in Germany by the Nazis? Do Liesel and Hans treat Jewish people the same way as everyone else? Give an example from the movie as proof. This one was gorgeous. One of my boys wrote, the Nazis are A, asterisk, asterisk, holes. Liesel and Hans are not. Great answer, but I couldn't accept it. I said to him, Bailey, mate, I'm going to have to send you away. Can you clean it up a bit for me? Remember, when we write, you need to be conscious that the principal needs to be able to read this. So he went away and he corrected the capital letters for me. So I know we're getting to an end. They had lots of activities in their booklet. Things to take away from this. When you're faced with a challenging situation, like how do you teach a book to a class that cannot read, there'll be voices in the staff room, voices that say why. Why do you have to do this? Why? They're not the helpful ones. The voices that say how are the helpful ones. How can we make this happen? So listen for those voices around you and identify yourself in the staff room with people who can help you and not the sympathetic voices will always be there. And it feels good to have people sharing your concern. Last year when I taught this unit, we had a different HOD who said, you can teach a different book because your class is so challenging. So I did Animal Farm, 97 pages, no problems. This year's HOD said, no, differentiation means doing the same text in another way. So what I needed were the how voices, people who said to me, how can we make this book real? Consider classroom flipping. What part of the work really needs me? And that's the bit we need to do in class. Don't think in the orthodox manner. Backward map to your starting point, echoing what Ben has said. And then differentiation, so important. It's core teaching, it's not an added extra. Every student has the right to equal access to education and deserves respect and the opportunity to be treated with dignity. There's no place in a differently abled student's day for busy work. So I just want to encourage you, you will get classes where you'll look at it and go, oh my goodness, how can I do this? As I did when I first was told that I was teaching this book. But you can do it. You just have to think outside the box. Okay, thank you.